March 19th, 2026. Iranian ballistic missile strike, Ras Laffan, the world's largest liquefied natural gas export hub, and Kuwait's refineries at Mina al-Ahmadi and Mina Abdullah. No casualties. But within hours, Brent crude hits $116. Force majeure locks down 20% of global liquefied natural gas supply, and one question demands an answer. What happens when the damage is done, and the missiles have not stopped? Missiles and drones struck Ras Laffan Industrial City at 2045 UTC on March 18th, igniting fires across LNG processing modules and damaging export jetties. Qatar Energy confirmed extensive damage to LNG trains 1 through 3 and the GTL-1 unit, forcing an immediate shutdown of over 2/3 of the complex's liquefaction capacity. Satellite thermal imaging captured a 2-kilometer smoke plume rising from the condensate storage area. By dawn, force majeure was declared on all LNG export contracts, locking down roughly 16 million tons per annum, about 7% of global LNG supply. 2 fires were contained within hours, and no casualties were reported among the 120 personnel evacuated. In Kuwait, a coordinated wave of drones and ballistic missiles hit the Mina al-Ahmadi and Mina Abdullah refineries. At Mina al-Ahmadi, a drone ignited a fire in the catalytic reformer, shutting down crude distillation Unit 2. Mina Abdullah's Hydrocracker 3 suffered a roof collapse from a Fateh 110 missile, taking 12% of the refinery's capacity offline. Combined, the refinery outages removed 780,000 barrels per day from Kuwait's throughput, a 6% drop in national refining output. Both sites reported 0 injuries, with fires brought under control by emergency teams within 90 minutes of impact. Automatic identification system logs tracked LNG carriers and oil tankers withdrawing from both Ras Laffan and Kuwaiti ports, citing cargo anomalies and engine shutdowns due to toxic fumes. Satellite and independent open-source intelligence confirmed the scale of the disruption. 3 LNG trains and 2 major crude distillation units offline, with a repair window estimated at 30 days for Qatar, and phased recommissioning in Kuwait by late May. The physical destruction was immediate, but the operational impact reached far beyond the Gulf, sending shockwaves through global energy markets and exposing the vulnerability of critical infrastructure to targeted strikes. The Israeli airstrike on Iran's South Pars gas field in the early hours of March 18th triggered an immediate and public response from Tehran. Within hours, Iran's semi-official Mehr news agency broadcast an evacuation order for energy facilities in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, calling them legitimate targets under Iranian doctrine. The warning was repeated by the IRGC-affiliated Tasnim news agency, which stated that missile units were on high alert and ready to execute orders. By midday, the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through spokesperson Masoud Pezeshkian, issued a statement declaring that any state hosting U.S. forces would face direct retaliation against its energy infrastructure. At 10:22 UTC, President Donald Trump posted on X, warning that Israel would not strike South Pars again, and threatening a massive response if Iran attacked Qatari assets. Despite this, Iranian officials continued to frame the threat as a matter of national survival. The IRGC's Public Affairs Unit released a video later that day, attributing operational orders to the Supreme Leader and linking the planned strikes to the South Pars Red Line, a doctrine established in previous years that declared any attack on Iranian energy assets a trigger for a proportional response. Iran's messaging was coordinated and deliberate. State media alerts and social posts served both as a diplomatic warning and an operational signal, giving Gulf states and their Western partners a narrow window to evacuate critical sites. The evacuation order was not just a precaution, it was a direct signal that the threshold for retaliation had been crossed. For the IRGC, the attack on South Pars represented more than a military incident. It was a strike at the core of Iran's economic lifeline, justifying a rapid and forceful response against regional energy hubs closely tied to U.S. military presence. The logic of retaliation was spelled out in public statements and reinforced by the visible movement of Iranian missile units, leaving little doubt about Tehran's intent. B-2 Spirit bombers crossed into Iranian airspace in the early hours of March 19th, targeting hardened command and control nodes with precision-guided munitions. The main strike package focused on a cluster of C-2 facilities outside Shiraz, using coordinates relayed from F-35B reconnaissance flights operating out of Al-Dhafra. Each B-2 released AGM-158, JASSM long-range standoff missiles, and GBU-31 JDAMs, penetrating reinforced concrete shelters and severing communications with forward missile batteries. Lieutenant General Peterson, overseeing CENTCOM strike coordination, prioritized these nodes to disrupt Iran's real-time targeting cycle and force remaining launchers into autonomous pre-programmed fire modes. Meanwhile, F-15E Strike Eagles launched from Al Udeid, each loaded with a pair of GBU-72 bunker busters. The GBU-72, weighing 5,000 pounds, is engineered to penetrate over 3 meters of reinforced concrete before detonating. Strike videos released by CENTCOM show direct impacts on suspected missile silos near Bandar Abbas, with secondary explosions indicating destruction of stored munitions. The physics of the GBU-72, the kinetic energy on impact, the delayed fuse, and the mass are designed to collapse underground launch corridors and render fixed sites inoperable. On the maritime front, U.S. Navy surface action groups engaged over 130 Iranian fast attack boats in the Gulf. Rules of engagement authorized lethal force against vessels emitting missile targeting radar signatures. The after-action report said, neutralized by precision fires. That assessment summed up a campaign that left debris fields along the coast, stripping Iran of much of its seaborne launch capacity. The rapid multi-domain response combined stealth, electronic warfare, and kinetic strikes to systematically degrade Iran's ability to coordinate further attacks. Still, ISR feeds continued to track mobile launchers operating independently, underscoring the persistent threat even after the main C2 nodes were struck. Despite the scale and precision of U.S. counterstrikes, Iran's missile threat did not vanish overnight. Open-source analysts, working from satellite imagery and intercepted signals, estimated that roughly 10% of Iran's pre-strike missile inventory remained operational after the first wave of raids. This attrition model, drawn from decades of conflict in the Gulf, suggests that for every 10 launchers targeted, at least one survives, either hidden in rugged terrain or operating on a disconnected, pre-programmed cycle. Surviving mobile launchers, often concealed in civilian truck convoys or remote desert shelters, retain the ability to launch short-range salvos without central command guidance. U.S. Army modeling warns that even a degraded force, firing a handful of missiles, can breach layered defenses and threaten energy infrastructure in the Gulf. This attrition model highlights survivability in practical terms. The information space became a second battlefield. On March 19th, Iranian state media broadcast AI-generated images claiming the destruction of 5 USK C-135R tankers at Prince Sultan Air Base. Forensic review by independent analysts quickly exposed the imagery as fabricated. Airframe details and serial numbers failed to match any known aircraft, and satellite logs confirmed all tankers remained operational. Still, the propaganda campaign served a strategic purpose: to amplify perceptions of American vulnerability, and to pressure regional partners considering further cooperation with U.S. forces. The persistence of even a small number of autonomous launchers forced U.S. and allied planners to continue hunting for mobile command and control nodes and missile assets long after the main strikes. This ongoing uncertainty kept global energy markets on edge and complicated efforts to restore safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. The attrition model's 10% survivability figure, while reassuring in theory, meant that no critical site could be declared fully secure, a reality that would soon ripple through economic forecasts and operational risk assessments. Brent crude surged to $119.71 per barrel by the close of March 19th, its highest level since the 2022 Ukraine crisis. The Asian LNG spot price, tracked by the JKM index, jumped to $13.50 per million British thermal units, reflecting the abrupt removal of Ras Laffan's output from global markets. According to International Energy Agency data, the forced shutdown at Ras Laffan sidelined nearly 16 million tons per annum, about 20% of the world's LNG trade, sending immediate shockwaves through European and Asian gas contracts. In Kuwait, refinery outages at Mina Al-Ahmadi and Mina Abdullah cut national throughput by 780,000 barrels per day, a 6% drop that forced OPEC Plus to release strategic reserves to stabilize supply. Wood Mackenzie's quarterly outlook projected a $1.2 billion loss in refining margins for Kuwait, while Rystad Energy estimated direct repair costs for Ras Laffan alone at $3.5 billion. Dr. Maria Petrovich, senior analyst at the International Energy Agency, noted that even a rapid restart would not erase the risk premium now embedded in global energy markets. The immediate price reaction underscored not only the physical vulnerability of Gulf infrastructure, but also the market's acute sensitivity to targeted strikes on nodes critical to global supply. Admiral James Stavridis, reflecting on the operational landscape, outlined a conditional path to restoring stability in the Gulf. The benchmark for success was clear: neutralize Iran's remaining command and control nodes, and suppress autonomous missile launches to a threshold where commercial traffic through the Strait of Hormuz could resume with acceptable risk. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, 2,500 Marines embarked and ready, stood by to execute rapid amphibious deployment. Once overhead, sensors confirmed the degradation of hostile command and control. Their doctrine called for phased entry, first intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and air cover to guarantee airspace security, next coordinated naval suppression of enemy air defenses, and unmanned underwater vehicle threats, then insertion of a light amphibious landing team to secure key port terminals and begin mine clearance. Full reopening of the Strait depended not only on physical clearance of mines and unmanned underwater vehicles, but on the verified collapse of Iran's ability to coordinate further missile salvos. Until then, every hour counted. The operational roadmap was unambiguous: secure command nodes, sweep the maritime approaches, and hold ground until regional partners could resume energy flows. Yet with even a degraded missile force able to disrupt shipping lanes, the threat remained unresolved, and the burden of proof for security rested on persistent surveillance and rapid response. Today, the Gulf's energy corridors remain exposed. Iran's surviving missile force and mobile launchers keep escalation risks high, while global markets recalibrate to new volatility. Deterrence is under strain. The next salvo may not spare critical infrastructure. Vulnerability is now a standing order, not a passing shock.